Good morning, everybody. We'll let the others load here. Hopefully we'll have a big crowd. How are you doing, Amy?
Good. And again, my apologies for making us 3 minutes late because my computer was so slow.
No worries. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm Charlie Bengal Jr., the CEO of RE/MAX Allegiance. My co-host is Amy Lassen, an associate broker with RE/MAX in Colorado Springs. And we're both Tom Ferry coaches. And we'd love to get on here twice a month, talk about ways we can help improve the lives of realtors with hopefully some concrete strategies that can be implemented immediately. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. That was very well said, Charlie. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Thank you. I'm just reading from a teleprompter. I'm not really.
I can tell you weren't.
We want to talk about how to talk about the market. And
yes.
We discussed this last week, and I was also reading this morning, somebody on Facebook was saying that, and this will dovetail nicely into our discussion today, and I hate to spring this on you, but she was saying that I have a client who is always wanting to lowball offers.
Interesting.
A buyer client, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a buyer's market now, so why can't I get 10% off the list price?
Got it.
So that immediately got me thinking, well, how's that conversation going with the buyer before they're even shown a house, which we can get to maybe if we have time later today. But how to talk about the market. We wanted to talk about using stats. You know, we have an infographic here that I'll pull up, but what are your kind of almost introductory thoughts there?
Oh, okay. Kind of tough. I just want to dive into the deep end of the pool, but I think you've already made a great point. Well, and maybe we need to step even further back from, I have a buyer who wants to argue with me. So we have to step back not only to the first encounter and the first buyer presentation, but a step before that. And that is that your entire sphere of influence, every single person who knows, likes, and trusts you is being educated on an ongoing basis about the market to some degree. Something that we can and will address is that the person who's going to stay in their house for the next 5 years isn't really obsessed month to month about the change.
Right.
So we're going to address that too, but let's not wait until there's a lot of press to make a decision to talk about the numbers. So yes, make it a part of your regular touch plan, and we can talk about all the ways that you can do that eloquently. Yes. And then also make it a part of your process. Most of us, I'm just going to call out most of us, shortchange discussions of the statistics in the market at the time of buyer presentation or listing presentation. It's like, I sold them the comps, I gave them a net sheet, what more do you want from me? Well, it's super vital, and oh my goodness, does it grease the skids? I don't know if you know that expression, but everything goes so much better when they knew what they were getting into in the beginning.
Yeah, and you know, how many sellers still think that it's a seller's market because they remember their neighbor's house sold last spring, you know, 10 offers and it sold for 5% above ask, right? And they've not been paying attention to the housing market like realtors do, you know? And you know, there's been some chatter about things have slowed and interest rates have gone up and this, that, and the other, but I'm not sure that the average person is really paying attention to that, you know, like we are. And like you were saying a minute ago, we can't assume that everybody is in the know every day. This is what we do every day. That's not what our clients do every day. So,
but then we've got perspectives, and this is where the people listening really need to educate themselves. Because I will also say most of us are ignorant of the stats ourselves or what they really mean. Because I had an agent say to me the other day, Colorado Springs real estate market is down 4%. I said, 4% of what?
Right.
He actually said it, and he didn't even know what he was saying. I said, do we have 4% fewer licensed agents? Did you sell 4% fewer homes last year?
Right.
What are we talking about? And the truth of the matter is, I think it was maybe an inventory thing, and it was like a month over month. Like, boy, do you have to clarify.
Right.
This is a perfect illustration of the things that our local papers do. You know, the market's up, the market's down. It's like, what exactly are you saying?
Right.
So we have to do a much better job of knowing what these numbers are and giving a good interpretation to our consumer.
So speaking of the numbers, let me share.
Great. Right. Where do you get the numbers? That's another thing most of us ask.
So can you see my screen? Does it say market update?
It sure does for me.
Okay, there we go. So this is just for Northern Virginia, and we produce these monthly for 3 markets, for Washington, D.C., for Northern Virginia, and for Hampton Roads. And it has, I believe, 6 of the main pieces here.
Sure.
Just median sold price, sold to list price ratio, average days on market, and current homes for sale. And these are typically, this is all year over year. I will tell the Allegiance associates who may be watching that our website stats are month over month. So you actually have very easy access to both. So myallegiancehome.com month over month, the infographics that we put out monthly are year over year stats. So what are some, I don't even know that we really need to jump into this per se and go over each number, but how would you use this?
So 2 ways that I use this, and forgive me, Charlie, I always tend to be quite irreverent, and you put up with me. So my own brokerage provides me with something somewhat like this, and most of the agents find it busy. It actually has even a few more stats on it than this. They find it visually busy and kind of overwhelming, and they will admit to me they don't know what it means. So they'll say, why would I send this to my clients? And the thing that I say to them is, what are you sending to your clients now? Nothing, right? They're still in the I'm overthinking it, I'm a perfectionist phase.
Right.
And I say the truth of the matter is the average consumer doesn't need to know the blow by blow. That 30-day change is not really significant in their life. So by sending this, you're just sort of setting the drumbeat underneath the tune right here. You're saying, I'm reliable, I'm always coming at you, I'm always giving you the stuff that you need, and when you're ready, you'll read it. And if this could be accompanied with either a brief explanation or a BombBomb video, right? Thanks to RE/MAX Allegiance, all your agents have access to this in their BombBomb accounts,
right?
And you just click on it and then do a video above it and say, for all you numbers fans, the details are below, but here's what I wanted to tell you this month. And so you can give kind of the punchy, here's the thing you might want to know, or here's the thing I found interesting. And then you're engaging every possible audience. So that would be a suggestion that I have, is send it no matter what. Create that steady rhythm of touch.
Yep.
Let them not forget you. Show how because this is so beautifully designed. Show them how professional
we're
you are.
talking about sending it via email, right? BombBomb. We can also send it via postal service, right?
That's true. Everyone has access to print it via PDF.
Sure. So for those agents who struggle with what am I going to send every month, or they don't have a plan, and it's, oh my gosh, it's January or February or whatever month they may be watching this in, what am I going to send? Well, maybe send the most recent infographic, right? Just get it out, get it in front of them, because I like to say that stuff that is sent through the mail, it's often at least opened and they see your name. Email, it could end up in spam. They could be on vacation and just be, going through and deleting all emails that are not super critical, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think I've always told the folks that I coach, it makes sense to send something via postal service once a month and send something via email once a month.
Right.
And if I had to choose, I would do the postal service route, because they're going to at least see you. There was the old joke of, if you'd send a postcard to a farm, and to single families, right? And they check the mail, and as they're flipping through the mail from the mailbox to the recycle bin in the garage, they at least see your face and your name before it hits the recycle bin.
Yeah.
In the case of email, that doesn't always happen, right? They literally may not see it.
That's
so good ways to use that: email, snail mail, BombBomb. And then would you follow up if you sent this via snail mail and say, hey, did you get especially if you don't do it monthly, maybe you send this quarterly, right? Hey, did you get my infographic in the mail about the market last week? To me, that's an awfully warm call for people that struggle to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Did you get what I sent you is like the easiest opening line ever.
It is. And I was honestly going to say that, and not to push too hard that we shut people down, but I would encourage you to do this monthly, because it is a monthly piece. And then be consistent. Call it whatever frequency works for your marketing plan, and quarterly is great. But the sooner the better to say exactly what you just said, Charlie. Hey, did you get it? Even if you snail mailed it, just say, hey, did you get it? They'll
Right.
say yes.
Right.
Say, what do you think? Did you have any questions about our market? They might go, no, I didn't really understand it. And then you can laugh and say, and you know what? That's a big picture anyway. I would be happy to send you a neighborhood update for your area. Are you interested? Or you could
Sure.
offer to do a CMA or an annual
Right.
review. What
Right.
an incredible opener to talking about their home's new value and their position in the market.
Yeah, and again, one of the tips of the day is if you struggle with picking up the phone, send them something first. It gives you a reason to call them, and it's a soft call. I know there's so many people that struggle to call their clients because they're nervous. They claim they don't know what to say, even though we have scripts, right? But I always say the easiest call is that, did you get what I sent you? Did you get my mail, right? It just makes for a really soft and easy opening.
Yes.
Other comments on the infographic?
Well, so I think, you tell me, Charlie, but I think something that the agents that I train at my brokerage struggle with, I don't even know what these numbers mean. Like,
Okay.
I can't explain it to the consumer. And then another thing is, even if they technically can, like, I'm trying to look at one really quick. New listings are down 2.9%. Some of them can't take that further to something concrete, right? Some sort of very, very concrete point to the consumer. I think that's not a significant enough change that might not be a huge talking point for me. 3% change in active inventory, that's all right. But maybe that is the point, that we're relatively stable, right? That somebody who said there's been a huge shift in the market and whatever, you could say, actually not so much. When we look at, our inventory is quite stable. You could say something like that.
Right.
But translate it to English. And so I want to acknowledge that for most of us, that's a challenge. And Charlie, I think I've said this to you before, that me being an expressive and you being an analytical, I think in some ways we're equally handicapped at doing a good job of explaining statistics to consumers because it makes good sense to you, right? Numbers don't confuse you, right?
Yes.
But does that mean you've really honed the craft of explaining them in a practical way to the consumer? No, because it already makes good sense to you. Whereas expressives like me struggle with numbers. I'm not quite sure I know what this means, and then I'm not going to explain it well to my client. So I tease my students that we're all in the same boat. We all have got to be way better interpreters of the market for our consumer.
Yeah, and I think that the interpretation depends on what that person wants to do. If you're a buyer, this is not necessarily, how would you spin this as an agent if you're talking to a buyer? So inventory is down, right? Prices are still up.
Yep.
How do you overcome the buyer that thinks, oh, well, I'm going to wait till prices go down, right? I mean, that objection, then you're getting into how well do you know the market? Are you paying attention to the economic forecasts?
Yeah.
Nobody's expecting prices to drop, right? We're expecting a leveling off of prices in 2019. So I think that's that Tom script of when you're at the party and somebody says, hey, how's the market? What does he say? He asks a question.
Yeah.
It depends. Are you looking to buy, sell, or invest, right? Where most of us are like, oh, it's crazy, right? Or, oh, it's really slow. But that's only pertinent to a third or half the people. If you're a seller,
no, please.
I was just going to say, if you're a seller and looking at this, the current homes for sale year over year are down rather significantly. New listings are down a little bit, and we're still seeing prices up and average days on market are low. So, you can see here that things are still selling. Prices are still going up slightly, but there's less inventory. So maybe now is a good time to sell instead of waiting until April or May or spring, right? So that's what I interpret this. So, but I think you need to be able to, I don't want to say spin it.
Well, I think create
the right term, but yeah.
I think you need to string these numbers into a sentence, which you just did very well. And I think the fourth data point here is that 13 days fewer on market than a year ago. When we talk about slightly less inventory, fewer days on market, prices are continuing to go up. None of these statistics, by the way, on this particular graph are wildly extreme. They show a pretty mild change, but 13 days, that's 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So we can say we see some upward pressure on pricing, we see a little bit less availability, and things are moving faster. So is it a bargaining market? Is it a buyer's market? I don't think so, right?
Right. And then knowing the market with the whole interest rate discussion, right? I've joked that we've said for 5 years that interest rates are going to go up, right? And then they didn't budge year
For my whole
year
career.
after year, right? And
Yes.
then finally last year they started to budge. And then we were at 12-week lows a couple of weeks ago. So, there was some angst in certainly the stock market with the Fed raising rates as quick as they did. So then they kind of stalled. So, the buyer who is waiting for prices to drop, one of the challenges they have is going to be the pressure on interest rates. And I think that's why it makes sense to be paying attention to the economic forecasts of NAR, Moody's, Zillow. Love them or hate them, they have rather intelligent people working in the economic department of Zillow, and they put out some really interesting forecasts for all of the large markets. And you can just go to Zillow.com and click on it, and then maybe doing that research and looking at a few of these economic forecasts, and then being able to, once you're convinced yourself, listen, every single economist is saying that rates are going to go up by X percentage this year, then maybe that's the case. And even if it's not, that's still something that you can share with the buyer who says, you know what, I want to wait till prices start to go down, because the reality is prices may be leveling off, but with interest rates going up, unless you're paying cash, your buying power is probably still shrinking. And being able to tell that story with the help of this infographic, and also knowing the market in general, right, when it comes to rates and things like that.
No, so I think you've made a couple of excellent points. We've been talking about the infographic and how it's a great conversation starter in a lead generating setting, right?
Yes.
And so, fortunately or unfortunately, there are a few other stats that are very important, and it can't all fit on a single infographic. So really, really valuable, I think, for everyone to know list to sell ratios. And It depends on how big your markets are. My market is pretty modest. We have one MLS, we can have some big picture numbers that help. But when I have a new buyer, I love to pull specific stats for the target property that they've identified and show them, oh, look at this. Based on your criteria, there are 2 active, 40 under contract, and 30 sold in the last 30 days. Oh, look what you missed.
Right.
What an amazing moment to say, this is the lay of the land, right? Rather than just stick them in the car blind. Now they're like a kid in the back seat. They have no idea where we're going, and they're hoping their parents know what they're doing.
Yep.
If you show them the map at the buyer presentation and say, this is where we're going and this is what we're seeing, huge, huge reality check. The other number that I love to give that I can easily do so because of the condensed nature of my market is that list to sell ratio at the time of contract. Now, I can get it from my MLS for like over time. Yes, this one high-end property sat on the market for 4 months, and yes, it had multiple price options. That's not the number I'm actually interested in. And this is the reason I tell them. We don't live in a haggler's market. As you can see, I have this graph that goes back all these months and years. And it shows that we're always in the high 90s, and right now we're pushing 100% of ask.
Yep.
And this is MLS wide. This includes our high end, which doesn't really move. We're a very different market than yours. So when we're looking at our high end that could sit for a year and our low end that sells in 2 days, we're looking at 99.7% of asking.
Right.
So what I show the buyer is, for whatever reason, we don't live in a haggler's market. And so if we come upon a seller who's unrealistic and pricing high, the chances that they'll accept your low offer isn't very good. Because as you can see, until we reach the sweet spot.
Right. And I think and we've transitioned nicely into that question that I asked at the beginning of the show, which is that agent who was having a problem with, my buyer wants to write lowball offers. And as soon as I saw that question this morning, I was thinking, what does your buyer presentation look like? It's not, yes, if you're working Zillow leads, the entire point of that lead is to get in front of them, to get the appointment. But then once you have the appointment with them and you've built rapport, you need to sit down and have a buyer presentation with them and set the roadmap of how this is going to work. Even if they've bought a house before, you still need to set the roadmap, right? They may understand the importance of a home inspection, but they may not understand that the list price to sale price ratio is 99%. And if they do, then they're going to be less apt to write that offer at 5% below asking price. And setting that expectation before you start showing properties, I think, is so important. Maybe they're going to identify, for instance, that no, I'm looking for a deal only,
Yeah.
right? It has to be 10% off. I need to get a deal. And then you can at least be thinking, is this somebody that I want to work with?
Yeah.
So in the buyer presentation, I was telling a group of agents last week, using your knowledge is great, but then handing them something during or after the meeting is critically important, which is where the physical buyer presentation comes from. It can't just all come from memory.
No.
So depending on the situation, if they're a first-time home buyer, that presentation is going to be a little bit different than the seasoned home buyer, but you still need to be discussing stats and why they matter to the client. And list price to sale price ratio is just so important. And by the way, as an aside, we all need to know our list price to sale price ratio on both the sales side and on the listing side. Because when we are competing against Redfin, right, where they have lists for 1% or 1.5%, and yet their list to sale price ratio is 95% and ours is 99%, who does the seller net more money with? They net more money with us, and we need to be able to point that out factually, right, to the client. So, the theme of the show was how to talk about the market, and that's what I wrote down. And I think that another theme is the importance of knowing the market, and that doesn't mean you need to study it for an hour a day, but at least review the infographic that your brokerage is sending you, at least knowing your sale price to list price ratio, at least knowing what the economic forecasts are in your area. What is the 12-month forecast with prices, whether it's right or wrong, right? These are experts. We're allowed to rely on experts, right? They may be wrong, but it's better than just going in blind. And then the same thing, rates. What are rates expected to be doing? They may be wrong, but I think it's important to at least know so we can educate the people when we're sitting down with them up front. Not just the roadmap of how to buy a house, but also how these stats fit into their plan, right? And that way we can talk about, is now the right time to buy, right? Does now make sense for you? There was another show that you and I watched where and we've since talked about it, I think, where, the discussion around preeminence, right? And this particular person, Jay Abraham, was talking about, you become preeminent when you can say no to a deal when it's not in your client's best interest.
Yep.
Right. So anyway, that was kind of a tangent, but I think all this does come together with, you don't have to be an analytical like me. You don't have to get up and read the Wall Street Journal every morning. But having a pretty good feel for the market is important. That way you can talk intelligently to your client, whether they're an analytical or some other personality type.
Right. And so I want to emphasize something that you just said. When you do the buyer presentation, and congrats to RE/MAX Allegiance for providing a pre-made, beautiful and detailed buyer presentation to their agent.
Customized to the agent.
Right.
Customized. Yeah.
Right. So you have that as a resource, but here's the thing. The stats aren't in there.
Right.
There's no way for your agent staff to be researching the stats and sticking it in your book. So the book is there, the process is there, but part of your buyer process has got to be keeping current, educating yourself, and maybe like I do, pulling the particular comps for their target property, right?
Yes.
So know that that's part of the process, but it's not built into the book. This is something that you have to do separately, and then make it visual, right? It's show, don't tell, right? Don't tell them the direction of the market. Show them like I do. Run your finger down, show them that column that has average days on market, whatever it might be, whatever form your sources come in. And I don't want to hear it, and I'm not going to turn into a grouchy mom. Oh, it's too long. That's too much data. I had this argument yesterday. Oh, I don't need to show them that. I don't. And it was because the agent didn't understand it. And I knew that. And I knew that. Okay. But I said, explain to me why that's not relevant. Explain to me why you're going to remove that part of it. Because I happen to know, because I built our home buying guide at my brokerage, I know what I say on each page. I know why I think those are relevant. And to have somebody say it's too long, this is a bother, right? I can't torture the poor buyer with 30 minutes of data. That's so long. They just want to see houses. Really? Really? This is a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 purchase. Right. They don't have time to be educated about their options. And I really do dig down. And what I do is say, interesting, tell me why that doesn't seem important, and it'll just turn out that they haven't studied enough, they don't know. So to your
Well,
point about,
and it creates a problem when you want to write the offer.
yeah,
Right? If they're not educated, then they're looking for a deal.
yep,
Right? Like
yep,
I said at the beginning of the show, this agent is dealing with this client who believes that it's a buyer's market.
sure,
And it's really not, at least not here, right? It's fairly even. But if you have buyers that are thinking it's a buyer's market, I'm going to get a deal,
yeah,
that's probably going to be a problem that could be nipped in the bud just by educating them. And I also like what you said about knowing list price to sale price ratio for your MLS or the Washington metropolitan area, right? It's not good enough. So if they're looking for 2-bedroom condominiums in Logan Circle, what is the list price to sale price ratio for 2-bedroom condos in Logan Circle? Let's
and
go over
average days
that
on
with
market.
them. Yes, let's
Yeah,
go over that with them during the presentation,
correct.
not when you're going to write the offer. So
Right.
get it into their head that, maybe you're going to get a 1% discount, maybe, if you're lucky, but that's
Sure.
it.
Sure.
I think that that's just so critical, and it
Yeah.
saves you a lot of time and aggravation if, we've all, I shouldn't say this, perhaps we've all in our career have worked with a buyer for a really long time that didn't buy.
Sure.
Shame on us. We didn't educate that person, right? And they're looking for a needle in a haystack or a deal that did not exist.
Mm-hmm.
And we should have identified that problem at the beginning and perhaps chosen not to work with them, or educated them enough to where they realized that, the deal that they were looking for just didn't exist.
Sure. So, but
So-
not only is it better to educate them up front, it's required. It's crucial, because if you wait until they're bent out of shape and they're crabby, and you're like, oh crap, I didn't teach you about the stats. Let
Right.
me do that now.
Right.
Too late, because what it looks like is you're an apologist.
Yes.
You're covering your own
Yes.
butt, and you're trying to make your case, and now you're not on their side.
Right.
Because I think this house isn't worth it. And you're like, oh, let me talk you into it. Now
Yep.
you sound like a shyster, right?
Right. Right.
So it's absolutely vital that you do it in the right order. And keep in mind with what I said about, is it too long? Is this too much data? It is too much. It's too much to absorb in a sitting.
Yes. Which
Do
is
it
one of the
anyway.
right.
Do it
And
anyway.
give them the book.
And then remind them and say, remember
Yes.
we talked about, and they're going to go, did we? Right. But keep it up, right? Talk to them about it on the phone. Do
Yep.
it in person. Remind them when you're out and about. Give them a chance to absorb this information, and don't be a crabtree about how the consumer's not quick enough on the uptake, because remember how long it took you to learn, right?
Right. Right.
So we've
Okay.
got to be patient with our consumer and really support them.
So that went quick.
Sure did.
I'm thinking that the next show should be on the buyer presentation
Okay, terrific.
and what to cover.
Great.
So let's
I'm going to say everything. So
so let's plan for that, and let's plan for the idea that not everybody is using a comprehensive buyer presentation, and maybe
Well, that's
there's people
true.
out there that don't want to use the Allegiance buyer presentation. If
Oh,
they're
you
not
know
with
what I wish we-
Allegiance, then they're watching this, right? So
I
how
wish
can
we
they? What are the ingredients to an amazing buyer presentation? So let's talk about that before our next show, and let's plan for that. And because I think it's a good stepping stone to what we went over today. Last minute thoughts from you, Amy.
Oh, I just want to say that when you were saying you don't have to spend a ton of time, I want to say to the people listening, you might, but because most of us aren't good at it yet. So here's my practical and tactical
Mhm.
recommendation. Okay. What if you committed every single day to reading even the infographic for 15 minutes? That's not all day, right?
Right. Right.
Read it out loud. Like sometimes I'll stare at a thing and think, what am I seeing here? Right?
Mhm.
Read it to a friend, explain it to a coworker, try to get your managing broker to your what do you guys call them? I
Managing
call them.
broker.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
get them to engage with you on exactly how they explain it, right? We have masterminds at my brokerage where every once in a while they bring in a stat and have to explain it to everybody else, right? Like,
Ooh, I
figure
like
out
that.
a way.
Yeah.
So I want you guys to take this homework seriously. We don't learn to play the cello or get six-pack abs with wish, wait, and hope, right?
Right.
You really got to do the daily disciplines. And it's not that hard, but you do need to try it. So everybody listening, I'd encourage you, spend a few minutes every single day this coming week, or maybe even 2 weeks between now and our next show, to teach yourself about the stats, and it will start to work. Because I was not a stats girl, and with practice, I have become one.
I love it. Okay, awesome, Amy. Always good to see you. Thanks for your time, and
You're
I will see
welcome.
you in a couple weeks. Thanks. Take
All
care.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.